Start recording now. 5, 4, 3, 2. All you.
Hello and welcome to War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast. We are coming to you, as we always do, from deep within the Outer Rim, far beyond the watchful eyes of Galactic Empire, but not away from the prying eyes of the Dark Lord of the Sith. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be talking about the last Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Vader, former Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker. Joining me on the panel today is, as he has for a while now, I don't know if could I consider you a permanent co-host now, Chris?
Sure, if you want to.
Sure, yeah.
Hey, I've got an opening since fourth wall closed now.
The voice you hear there is, of course, Mr. Christopher Stoley. Also joining us is a writer from Big Shiny Robot. Please welcome back Irish Robin.
Thank you.
So,
and not to cut your flow here, but I could be Miss Chris this day and age, and whatever you want to call me. Greetings from Hoth.
Yes. Yes, I've seen the pictures. Yes, you are. But yeah, so Vader. I think it's safe to say that at least the first 6 stories of Star Wars were, in a sense, Vader's story. It was his rise from Anakin Skywalker to his fall to his redemption. I mean, that was basically the first 6 movies was Vader's story.
Yep.
I mean, can we agree on that?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, doesn't change the fact that I would be chill with a Vader solo movie, but yeah, very much. We do have 6 movies all about Vader.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, let's start from the beginning. With his portrayal as the much maligned portrayal in Episode 1. Personally, I don't give. I can't even think of the kid's name. Boy's name.
Jake Lloyd.
Yeah, Jake Lloyd. As much crap as a lot of people do, he was a kid, and he was just given a role that, I mean, he did what he could with it.
Yeah.
He was 8, 9 years old. He did the best he could. So I mean.
Well, to be fair to George Lucas as well, anybody who's ever seen the original Jingle All the Way, Jake Lloyd was in that, and his acting wasn't any different than it was for Anakin Skywalker. I mean, the fact of the matter is, as much as Lucas is not the world's greatest dialogue writer, Jake wasn't the overly greatest actor for his time at that age. Not to say that he deserves the hate that he gets, but I think it's a mixture of both with that aspect.
Regardless of how you feel about the quality of it, I do appreciate various aspects of it. I think that he did capture a kind of hope to Anakin, and I think that makes it all the more tragic. With 2 and 3. So I like that.
Yeah. And I don't want to really spend a whole lot of time on the Jake Lloyd performance because he did only do it for 1 movie.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And personally, I think that, and this is kind of off tangent, but and we talked about this in one of our early episodes of maybe the idea of either casting someone, a different actress to play Padme in the first one, so that there wasn't that weird, that Padme doesn't change, in the 10 years, Padme doesn't change much, but Anakin grows up, even though there's only supposed to be like a 4-year difference between the two. Or, maybe casting Anakin a little bit older in Episode 1, so that it's not just this big, dramatic, huge, like, wait a minute, what happened? You were, like, so far apart, then suddenly you look like you're just, like you could be, just a couple of years apart between Anakin and Padme.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but in Episode 1, Natalie Portman was 16, 17? Yeah, she was supposed to be portraying 14.
14, yeah.
Which really isn't too far off if she was 16 years old.
Not too far.
But I understand why Lucas wanted a 9-year-old Anakin. Lucas wanted, like Iris said, he wanted to capture some form of innocence with Anakin, but at the same time be old enough where losing things like his mother and his friends and stuff like that would actually matter to him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I can kind of see both sides of the arguments with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So moving on then, of course, the person who in the movies has played Vader, or at least Anakin the most, of course, is Hayden Christensen. At least in the movies. We'll get to Matt Lanter later in his portrayal in the Clone Wars, but again, especially in Episode 2, much maligned. The whiny, the I hate sand. But I think I heard I think it was Kevin Smith said it best. It's like, yes, the whiny teenager who complains about everything turns out to be the most evil, sadistic person you would ever want to meet, and becomes the most evil Dark Lord of the Sith. Of course, because that's just how it the progression, you know. And we see that in Luke too. We see that whiny.
And in Kylo Ren.
Yeah.
So.
Point. Yeah, but I don't know. I don't really think I have much criticism of Hayden Christensen's performance. I just think that what he lacked was a real explanation as to how he turned out that way. Because from Episode 1 to Episode 2, he gets a drastic character change, and we don't know what exactly happened to him in those 10 years. Like, it kind of comes out of nowhere. And so I think that audiences perhaps found that quite unexpected and jarring, and you contrast the two performances, and it's not really well fleshed out. And so he's not, a like character, because we don't have a lot of sympathy for him. We don't know why he's like that.
Yeah. And I don't know, like, what books they had that were, or at least, and now they'd be probably considered legends. So I don't know what books they had written about that time between when Obi-Wan started training him to the beginning of Episode 2. So
there was some good ones. There were some good and bad ones at dealing with Anakin and Obi-Wan during Anakin's Padawan years leading up to Episode 2 and even in Episode 3. Like books like Labyrinth of Evil, which would fall under Episode 3, between 2 and 3. But there was Jedi Trial, if I'm not mistaken. That was before Episode 2, I think. But then there was real garbage ones like Rogue Planet, where Anakin and Obi-Wan wind up in a planet to get little fuzzballs connected to them that would turn into a living spaceship. It was very weird. But the one thing that did come from those is that it did, and I'm one of those people, I hate saying read the books to help expand the appreciation of the movies, but the one thing the Legends, whether good or bad, did do for Episode 2 and Episode 2's Anakin is it really did expand the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan. And so that way, when you first meet them in the elevator heading up to Padme's apartment, and they're having those little jokes about saving each other and pulling out of a nest of Gundarks and stuff of that nature, you start seeing that there was an actual friendship and relationship between the two. Although Anakin was, in every sense, he was a teenager. He was a teenager who started this training way too young, so he didn't have the discipline that most other Padawans would have had at his age. So he acted like your typical teenager. Imagine what your daughter's going to be like at his age. Imagine what my kids are going to be like at his age. You know what I mean? It does fit more than people give it credit to.
And also, I mean, going with that I think personally, just looking at how it ended up, of course, Obi-Wan may have been the worst person to have trained him in many ways, because it's like you just moved past your Padawan stage. You've just now been granted the rank of master, and you're given potentially the most powerful Force user ever as your Padawan. It's like here, you just graduated from college. Here's the keys to a Fortune 500 company. Have fun.
Right. I mean, yeah, when you put it that way, I don't know. I still probably think that Yoda would have been worse, but
I think the best teacher for Anakin, honestly, would have been Windu.
Qui-Gon.
If Qui-Gon dead,
Qui-Gon's still alive.
I think because you have Windu sensed that dark side inside of him, and that was one of the things Powers Windu used, was this able to connect to the dark side without using it. That was what part of his power was. He was able to almost connect with the dark side. He was very close to the dark side, so he had been able to maybe hone that side of him without having Anakin fall all the way. And he would have been a little bit more tougher, I think.
Yeah, but Windu never would have trained Anakin. From day one, Windu never liked Anakin and never trusted Anakin up until the point that Anakin revealed that Palpatine was the Sith Lord they were looking for. And as soon as he's like, look, if this is right, I'll trust you, is when Anakin betrays him. The exact reason why he didn't like him, you know? So, Windu would never have trained him.
But I mean, other than that, I don't.
Hold on. No. Okay. Iris is about to say something.
To our earlier discussion about portrayals of Anakin outside of the movies, and I think there's something that did it really well was the Clone Wars. So,
yes.
Anyone want to talk a bit about
that? Yes. In fact, for me personally, now it's the same way with Joker. When I see a drawing of Joker, or I'm reading something that Joker is speaking in, I don't hear anyone's voice but Mark Hamill's. Mm-hmm. When I'm reading a book and Anakin is speaking, I'm hearing Matt Lanter's voice.
Yeah.
I don't hear Hayden Christensen's voice. I don't see Hayden Christensen. I see Matt Lanter. I hear Matt Lanter. That's the voice I hear in my head now, because like Hamill, he's done the voice for so long. He's done that character for so long that is the voice, that is the cadence I hear in my head.
Well, that's fair, and I definitely won't take away from Matt at all for his performance. To me, though, to slightly disagree with you, when I'm reading a book dealing with Anakin in any way, shape, or form, outside of the Vader costume, obviously, maybe because of the fact that I've been with the prequels since the days the prequels released, I see Hayden. I see and hear Hayden. He is Anakin to me. To the point that it took me a while to get used to Matt's performance of Anakin in the Clone Wars.
You know, I can see that. I don't know, what I liked most about the Clone Wars was that it brought this kind of nuance to Anakin's character. And at first I was like, why on earth are they giving him a Padawan? Like, he's so not ready for that. But honestly, he really did develop such an important relationship with Ahsoka. And it's
watching,
it's
watching
like
that whole
go like that. It did kind of, to me, it went a ways to healing the kind of the trauma that Anakin had from his mother. So he got to fulfill that kind of parental role.
Yeah.
In a way, and he did caring for her quite a lot.
Yeah. And it did answer a lot of. I think it answered, like, when you watch it all the way through, it answers a lot of questions as to
it does.
What happens in episode 3. You can see the relationship between Anakin and Palpatine starting to grow. You see that happening. You see the manipulation, and you can see, because it's it's like you said, between episode 1 and episode 2, it's kind of the same thing with episode 2 and 3. You kind of start to see the seed sown in episode 2, but suddenly it's like Anakin's right by his side, Palpatine's side all the time, and it just seems to come out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. But with the Clone Wars, you actually start to see that grow, and that kind of that sense of, like I said, that sense of bringing it all together and closing that story, and the path, Anakin's path up to episode 3.
See, it's kind of funny when Iris had mentioned that Anakin was so not ready for a Padawan. It's funny because my takeaway of Ahsoka was always supposed to be Anakin's trial. It was supposed to be Anakin learning how to nurture a young Padawan, but also learn how to let go of things. Because eventually, either she was, like she did, she's going to leave the Jedi Order, or she's going to die, unfortunately, or she's going to become a Jedi Knight and move on to her own and have her own Padawan. It was a lesson for Anakin to learn to detach from things that he cared about. really, I don't. I think the person that was less prepared for a Padawan, going back to what Ira said earlier, was Obi-Wan. And it's no knock on Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan was a wise Jedi. He was a wise Jedi even as a Padawan. I mean, Qui-Gon said it himself. But the thing is that I think Obi-Wan's strengths were always the fact that he was a strong, wrong choice of words for a Jedi, but he was a strong soldier, not necessarily the world's most patient teacher.
Well, and also, to use a gaming term, he was the rules lawyer. Obi-Wan was ironically unlike his master, he was a Jedi's Jedi, and followed the code. This is the code. You do not deviate from the code. This is, and I don't think Anakin needed someone like that. That was very much, and there was a few times. I know there was one instance in Episode 2 when, looking back at it, I can see how Qui-Gon would have handled the situation much differently. They're talking with Padme in her room, and they're talking. I think they're talking about setting up security for her, and Anakin steps in and says something, and Obi-Wan puts him down, and says something about now is not, and you could see the look in Anakin's face of embarrassment and
not a good idea to humiliate people.
Kind of humiliated him right there. And I always think that, how would Qui-Gon have handled that situation differently, with more tact,
diplomatic?
And, said something to quiet him down, and then afterwards said, okay, this is how it's got to go down. Always remember, in situations like this, I know you mean well, but
it would have been call in, not call out.
Yeah.
Well, I think the big thing about Qui-Gon Jinn, the major difference between Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, which may have been the major difference between how Anakin turned out and how he could have turned out, is to an extent, like you said, Obi-Wan did not think like Qui-Gon did. Qui-Gon believed in the cosmic force and the living force. I truly believe Qui-Gon would have been fine with Anakin's marriage to Padme. Like that's how chill of a Jedi Qui-Gon was. To him, the will of the living force would have been that Anakin and Padme to be together and have children, which create even more stronger Force users, stuff of that nature. That's the will of the living force, where Obi-Wan really had a hard time seeing the living force from the cosmic force. To him, it was just the Force.
Yeah. No, I'm going to agree with that. That's a good point.
And I also think, even though there was a much bigger age difference between Anakin and, say, like Anakin and Padme and Anakin and Obi-Wan, I still think that relationship would have been completely different, because it seems like the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan was big brother, little brother. They were very much brothers. I think with Anakin and Qui-Gon, it would have been father. Yeah, it would have been much more father-son. And I think that's what Qui-Gon or Anakin needed, he didn't need a brother, he needed a father figure. He needed,
that's what Qui-Gon
and that's why he gravitated towards Palpatine. Palpatine filled that void that Anakin was missing of a much older father figure.
But was it really a father figure? I mean, think about it. It could have been. I was about to say it could. It could have definitely been an extreme case of like Stockholm syndrome, because he grew up in his life as a slave, used to people like controlling him and telling him what he needs to do, where he needs to go, but praising his abilities. I mean, Watto praised him left, right, and 6 Ways from Sunday about how good of a pod racer he was for being a human being. And then you have Palpatine basically feeding him the same lines, just, you're the most powerful Jedi I've ever seen. But at the same time, I'm still pulling your strings, little slave boy.
I think it goes a little bit deeper than that, in the sense that Palpatine actually he promised Anakin something he needed. He empowered him, whereas, Watto can, say what he likes, but Anakin doesn't really have an awful lot of choice. Like, he's got to make do with pod racing. But and everyone else has said, okay, you're the chosen one, and that's because you have all these midichlorians, and then to him it's probably probably doesn't make you feel any more special. And then Palpatine comes along and says, hey, maybe I can save people you love from dying, and then Anakin is interested, and so maybe he's the one with the power to do that. So I do think it's just an issue with empowerment.
See, she brings up an extremely good point that we forget in the factor of the downfall of Anakin Skywalker. For as powerful as he was, and as humble as he, not humble's not the right term, as giving as he was up until the point that he turned and everything else, Anakin had a ego. Anakin had a major ego, and the big thing that Palpatine did was feed his ego. And he probably hated the fact that in the Jedi Order, even though everybody believed he was the chosen one, they weren't going to placate his ego on that.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't trust him. They didn't grant him the rank of master. Like, that's so offensive. Like, I would be offended.
Actually, watching that movie, I was offended when they did that to him. I myself was like, that's kind of screwed up.
But I think if they would have gone about it a different way, if they would have, and it could have been, I mean, if they would have said, look, you have all this power, we just don't think you're quite ready yet. You're almost there, but we don't think, instead of saying, like, just how they said it, that's more of the problem. That I think was the biggest problem of it. It was this: we don't grant you the rank of master. We grant you the rank, but we don't grant you to sit on this council.
I mean, you can have a seat at the table. We can, we want to use your opinion, but it doesn't mean we have to. Like, that's, of course. Whereas Palpatine offered a chance to collaborate. He said, if we work together, we can discover the secret. Like, I know which way I would go. Like.
Well, that's what I was about to say. Is the best metaphor I can use is like you're a kid and you get invited to the grown-ups table at Thanksgiving. You don't have to sit at the kids table no more, but don't speak. Don't get involved in the conversation because you're not old enough. Yeah. That's literally what the Jedi Council for Anakin was. Yeah.
But at the same time, I think we can point the fingers at everyone, but like with everything, even with in real life, it really comes down to there's one person who's to blame for Anakin's fall. And that's Anakin himself.
Oh, absolutely.
Anakin, and that was part of the problem, is even up to the very end, even up until episode 6, he never took responsibility. He always passed the blame off on someone else.
Reading the books, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I mean, Anakin after the transformation of Vader, the hunt down of the Jedi Order, the battles and the facings of Luke Skywalker and everything else. In a lot of the books, remember in books, unlike movies, you can actually get into the thoughts of the characters. And there's been many portrayals, both in Legends and in canon, where you could tell there's kind of remorse in Anakin. Maybe not necessarily for the right reasons. He's not feeling remorseful because, I've done these terrible things, but remorse in the sense of, what have I become? I'm becoming more and more of the monster.
Yeah.
And he thinks about Padme a lot, and he thinks that, well, I mean, she's dead now, so I mean, I guess he doesn't really have anything else to do. Like, he has nowhere to go. He's just stuck on the dark side. Like, honestly, even if he did, like, he wouldn't have anywhere to go with that, right?
Well, that's it. The dark side for him, the addiction of the dark side for him after putting on the Iron Lung was really that he was in so much pain, physically and emotionally. The loss of Padme, the loss of his unborn child, which he didn't know he had twins at the time. The loss of his unborn child, the betrayal, which weighed heavy on him of the Jedi Order, even though he did believe for a time in the Order 66 being because of the Jedi betrayed the Republic. All that weighed on him, that the dark side gave him the only relief he had, which was release his anger, release his frustration, release his pain. Yeah. But he didn't. He wasn't necessarily like a Darth Maul, which was just a rolling rage. He was really using the dark side as kind of therapy. as sad and sadistic as it is, it was kind of therapy for him.
And like you kind of hit on this too. He thought he had no choice.
Mm-hmm.
He thought. And you see that in episode 6 when he's talking to Luke, that when he says it's too late for me, my son, and he literally thought it's too late. You know, you could tell that in his voice that he wanted to come back. He wanted to, but he thought, "There's no way. I can't. I'm too far gone. I can't come back." And I think that's a good story of redemption right there. That no matter how far you get, there's always that glimmer. Yeah, you have a choice up until you draw your last breath. You have a choice. And now that we're into talking about Vader in the suit, but first, before we get to that, I know a lot of people give the duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan a lot of grief for being too choreographed and too much flippity flip, and it looks too much like a dance. I think there's so much emotion behind there.
Yeah, it's definitely in my top 3 lightsaber fights in the entire saga. It's amazing. Absolutely love it.
It makes their duel on the Death Star mean that much more. When you watch that, when you see that, and especially if you've seen Episode 2 in the Clone Wars, and then you watch Episode 3 and see that duel, and then you see them facing off again in A New Hope on the Death Star, it just brings so much more weight to that, that duel.
Well, in reality, I always looked at Episode 4 as Vader was toying with Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan was an old, broken man by this point. He didn't have it anymore, so Vader could have struck him down in like 2 seconds. Chose not to.
I took it a little bit differently. I took it as Vader hasn't seen Obi-Wan in
20 years.
20 years. And he remembers what Obi-Wan was like before. And he heard the story about how by this time he'd probably heard rumors that he had taken down Maul. That he might have heard stories that Obi-Wan had taken down Maul, possibly.
I don't think so, and the only reason I'll state that is because when Anakin became Vader, he refused to ever step foot in Tatooine again. However, had he known that Obi-Wan was hiding, if he would have heard Obi-Wan took out Maul, he would have known it happened on Tatooine. He would have gone and eradicated Obi-Wan.
That's true. But I get the sense of this was a Vader that was very tentative. He was one that was looking like, okay, I remember what this guy could do before. I remember how he took me down. I don't want to make that mistake again. I want to, very, very. I didn't take it as toying. I took it as, okay, what is this guy going to do? I gotta be on my guard. I need to be careful. I need to watch what he's doing. I didn't take it as toying at all.
I think I would agree with you, but I think that probably the strongest indicator of that would be, when Obi-Wan kind of vanishes and Vader steps on the robe to check that he's really gone. I think that signifies it pretty well.
But before we move on in the conversation, I definitely want to rant a second on this hate for Episode 3's lightsaber duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan. The raw emotion that was behind that, the epicness and scale of it happening, and we grew up. People like myself and Mark, we're older gents. We grew up with the original trilogy. We've heard the stories forever of how Vader wound up in the suit, and it was a battle over a volcano with Obi-Wan, where Obi-Wan left him for dead at the mouth of a volcano, and we got that. And then let's take in the fact that this was so much wanted by the fans and so beloved by the fans that Hayden Christensen, for as much grief as you guys, not the panel, but you fans have given him over the years, and Ewan McGregor spent 8 hours a day for 4 months working on this lightsaber duel. So that way, when it came up on screen, there was little to no CGI in it whatsoever. Nothing was sped up or anything else. That was them doing the performance.
Yeah.
In every which way, there was so much love in that lightsaber battle. To even remotely disrespect it, to me, is disrespectful to the franchise.
And it was also cool for me to see, speaking of Hayden, is when he appeared at Star Wars Celebration and got a standing ovation. I think that meant as a fan of those, especially of Episode 3 being definitely my favorite of the prequel trilogy.
Absolutely.
That had to be a cool moment for him. It's almost like this recognition of, okay, I'm almost like some of the fans accepting, like saying, okay, time has passed now. You're part of this.
All right. Well, let me ask you both this then, because I kind of make jokes about it. I made a joke about it on Journal of the Jedi, talking about The Last Jedi. That Rose, the character Rose in The Last Jedi, it to me is worse than Jar Jar Binks. To the fact that I've forgiven Jar Jar Binks because Rose is worse. The reason I bring that up as a metaphor is to state: do you think that maybe people are forgiving Hayden Christensen because of how many people are, forgive me here, bitching and moaning about Rey being such a Mary Sue?
I don't think so. I don't know if it's necessarily related. Like, I mean, people have the prequels have been out for a really long time, and so people have they've made their peace with it. And I mean, honestly, Revenge of the Sith was the first Star Wars movie I ever saw in theaters. So, I don't know. I mean, I didn't even know that people were talking crap about the prequels until I grew up. So.
Well, it seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong. To me, it seems like the hatred for the prequels, the hatred for Hayden Christensen, died when the Star Wars fan base had something new to bitch about, which was the new sagas.
No, people still complain about it. Like, in all the Star Wars fan groups I'm in, occasionally there'll be a post about being like, oh, am I the only one who actually doesn't like the prequels? And it just starts a bunch of, people still complain about the prequels. It's just that I feel like the people that like the prequels care less about it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, now that we're talking about moving on to Vader himself, Vader in the suit. One thing I found kind of interesting that people don't remember, I think a lot of people don't really remember, is in many a sense, Vader was not the main villain of Episode 4. He was the heavy.
Yeah.
Well,
Tarkin was the main villain of Episode 4.
I wish Tarkin lived a little bit longer.
He was, but he wasn't. The main villain through all 6 movies was Palpatine. He was the puppet master throughout all of it.
Yeah. But you don't really get a sense of that until Episode 5.
Right.
Of what the Emperor, it's almost like you almost get a sense in the novelization, if I remember correctly, the novelization of Episode 4, there was almost this idea of, if we could only get the Emperor to see, what's going on out in the Outer Rim, what his generals are doing in his name. It was almost like you had the Emperor as this figurehead who had no real power, who was over here, and if we could just get him to see. It's not until you get to Episode 5 that you really think, okay, the Emperor himself is bad.
Yeah, the Emperor himself actually has power, and he's the reason. Yeah, I know. I see.
Well, the Emperor was definitely painted in the novelizations and a lot of the Legends books and a lot of the comics for the period. He was definitely painted as somebody who had gained so much power before anybody even knew he was a Sith Lord. He had gained so much power that he became paranoid in his own power and shut himself off from his empire. The only people that could see him was his most trusted advisors. He would never make public appearances. He would never be without some sort of guards around him in locked rooms. Like, he really closed himself off from the rest of the galaxy and became very recluse.
Yeah, I found it interesting that, again, going off on another tangent, but that's what we do here at War of the Stars, is in the end of Rebels. And I don't know if you've been able to see any of Rebels, Iris.
I'm working my way through it. I'm vaguely aware of some of the major plot points. I'm kind of midway through season 2 at the moment. It's very difficult for me to access it because I live in Canada right now.
Okay.
So I can't really get on Disney XD or anything. But I do know the main plot points, so don't worry about spoiling it.
Okay. So there in the season finale, the Emperor, or at least a hologram of the Emperor, shows up. And I thought it was interesting that it was the young initially it was a younger emperor. It was the emperor from episode 2 and 3. So
Okay.
that's what the hologram looked like.
Like he looked like the Chancellor.
Yeah, he looked more like the Chancellor. And from reading some of the stuff and hearing some of the stuff, it's interesting to find out that was kind of the face. That was the face of that the emperor put out to the general public. Was that face? Like, it wasn't the haggard, hooded emperor. It was this, kindly, gentle grandfather almost. But anyway, that was just a little bit of an aside. But
actually, it's funny because I had this conversation with Brian Miller about that exact thing on the episode. That I found it a little jarring in myself because of the fact that, like, I think back to episode 3 when he reorganized to the Galactic Empire, he played off the fact that the Jedi scarred him and disfigured him, stuff of that nature to gain sympathy. To all of a sudden be hiding the fact that he's scarred and disfigured, it made no sense to me. And here, Brian, of course, the keeper of canon, the librarian himself, had let me know that there was numerous books that I have yet to read, where you go through and you see, and even like in Battlefront 2, in the background, the video game in the background, and some of the worlds, you see like propaganda promotional posters and stuff like that. And Palpatine was, in fact, portraying himself as the Chancellor, if you will, instead of the haggard Emperor.
Yeah, all of the promotion, in a way, it kind of makes sense because you look at the promotional, you look at even historical Earth, and you look at historical posters of Hitler in Nazi Germany, and he never portrayed himself in posters, where he was, on there of having Parkinson's or shaking. He was always, there's a famous poster of him as a Teutonic knight, bold, sitting on top of a steed. Stalin did the same thing. Stalin was like 4 foot nothing, but you never saw that in any of the promotion posters because they wanted to give this era of strength and power, and that's I think there was kind of the same thing. Of this idea of, maybe not power, but this idea of almost Grandpa Palpatine. This kindly, gentle, I know what's best for the galaxy.
Yeah. I mean, perhaps it might not seem too disparate to note that he did mention to the Senate why his appearance suddenly changed. Of my life has left me scarred and deformed, but I don't know, maybe that was just a kind of Senate thing, but like the entire galaxy didn't need to know that necessarily.
Yeah,
that is true. I mean, Rebels does take place before he disbanded the Imperial Senate, obviously. Yeah. So, but maybe the only people that knew Palpatine for what he was the Senate, and of course the Inquisitors and Vader, but. And the highest ranking officers in the Imperial fleet, but to everybody else, to the common citizen, he was, as you said, Pappy Palpatine.
Pappy, yeah.
Well,
and getting back to Vader and his portrayal in Rebels, the few times he's shown up, I really loved how they portrayed him in Rebels and Rogue One too. Of this less is more. With Vader in that situation, less is more. I didn't want to see, Vader every episode show up every episode. Vader was the boogeyman. During this time period, Vader was the boogeyman. I've said this before. Vader was the guy that when parents were putting their kids to bed or they got in trouble, you'd say, you better be good or Vader's going to come and get you. Mm-hmm. Well, Vader was a myth.
For all the hate that the Disney-led Lucasfilm has been catching from fan bases, the one thing that you cannot deny through books, through comics, through cartoons, through Rogue One, Vader is the guy we've all expected to see. He is brutal. He is vicious. He is unremorseful. Just scenes pop in my head. Of course, the infamous hallway scene in Rogue One was just the greatest 2 minutes of pure joy in my life, which is really sad to say since it was mass murder. You know, the scenes of like in Vader Down, the comic, where he crashed and all the rebels are surrounding him. It's, give up, you're surrounded, and he like ignites his lightsaber. And he says, "All I'm surrounded by is fear and dead men." You know,
Yes.
or the newest Vader run comic where he captures Jocasta Nu, the librarian from the Jedi archives, and she turns around and tells all his troopers that he's Anakin Skywalker, and literally the scenes in the comic, as soon as she says that, you're taking orders from a Jedi, that's Anakin Skywalker. Vader just looks at the troopers. Next panel, they're all being pushed out the freaking ship. He just kills all of them.
There's also the scene in it's the Luke Skywalker.
I'm sorry.
Luke Skywalker comic when they see Vader and they try to take him out. And he just throws up the stormtroopers as a wall for Chewie to shoot at as a shield. And there's another scene where he loses his helmet, and he's walking. You can hear him choking, and one of the stormtroopers sees him like, "Oh dear Lord, no!" And you just see his head facing this way, and then it's facing the opposite way. The next panel, it's just
What were you about to say? Hold on a second, Mark. What were you about to say, Iris? Because we.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I was just gonna say, like, my favorite thing about the hallway scene is that when he ignites his lightsaber, like, he's turned off all of his, like, breathing apparatus, and so he literally stopped breathing just so he could scare the rebels when he ignited his lightsaber, and just, I don't know, I just think that's such an Anakin thing to do. Like, he did it for the drama.
It really was. I mean, the scene, the part that sticks out in the hallway scene to me the most, has and will always, was when he lifted that one guy up onto the ceiling, battling the other guys, ignored him for a second, and then as he walks past him, he just lazily reaches back with a lightsaber and cuts him in half. Like, that is literally, forgive me here for the vulgarity, but that is literally an Anakin don't give no fucks moment.
Exactly.
He did more in 2 minutes than Krennic did in the entire movie. Like, Vader is effective. Vader gets stuff done. Like,
exactly. Well, and Vader also had this, and you see it in Jedi and in Rebels too. Vader had this way of making, as sadistic and as evil and as bad as he was, of making the person that he was working for seem worse. He does it with in Rebels. When the one of the episodes where the lieutenant governor, whatever you want to call her,
Price,
wasn't able to get the not Price, the one who
the blonde-haired one.
Yeah. She says, and he says, he makes the line of Tarkin wants to speak with you in his office. And that's all he said. Something like, yes, Tarkin wants to speak with you tomorrow in his office personally to discuss the matter. And doesn't have to kill her, doesn't have to force choke her, just says, yeah, Tarkin wants to speak with you. And you could tell on her face that, I'm dead.
Yeah, and
I would rather you force choke me right now and be done with it than what Tarkin is going to do to me.
Well, he absolutely the first time as fans were introduced to Vader doing exactly what you're saying was really Return of the Jedi, where the opening scene where he shows up on the Death Star 2 and he's talking with the guy in charge of the construction of the Death Star 2 and how it's behind schedule. And when he reveals that the Emperor is coming, and you can explain that to the Emperor, and he's like, we'll double our efforts. And Vader's line, I mean, it was the most chilling line you could give is, I hope so, Commander, for your sake. The Emperor is not as forgiving as I am. And as fans, we sat there and watched Vader be ruthless for 2 movies. To hear that somebody's worse than him?
You're like, wait a minute, he's not the big bad guy?
And I think that that is a dynamic that I like that much better than the kind of dynamic that Kylo Ren had with Snoke. I thought that it might be a good comparison because I didn't find Snoke nearly as compelling as Palpatine.
Well, I think because Palpatine was a strategist, and the best way I can describe it, forgive me here if maybe I used the wrong terminology, I kind of look at Snoke as a dreamer. And I base that off of the first conversation that Kylo has with with Snoke in Last Jedi. He had everybody believing that he was this big bad, the first big bad since the Emperor. But in reality, he was dreaming of being able to take Ben Solo and create another Vader.
Yeah.
And when he realizes that, Ben's more of a disappointment than the next, Darth Vader, that's when all of a sudden, like, his dreams are shattered on what his new First Order Empire was going to be like. You know what I mean? So the best way I could describe Snoke was he's manipulative, because he manipulated the First Order in believing that this is the right cause. He manipulated Ben Solo into believing he could become the next Darth Vader. But in reality, Snoke was a wannabe.
Mm-hmm. I think you can in many ways look at both of them as being, and this isn't a knock on Kylo, the character, or the actor who played him, but Kylo in many ways was a wannabe too. He was a wannabe Vader.
He absolutely was. He absolutely was, yeah.
Yeah, and Snoke was a wannabe Emperor. And, I mean, honestly, neither one of them, and again, not a knock on the character. I think that in Episode 9, we'll see Kylo kind of even come into his own even more as a character. And I think we saw that in episode 8, with him kind of destroying the mask and moving in a different direction. But definitely in episode 7, you could definitely see he was a Vader wannabe. He was a Vader fanboy. I
think with the actions that he took on Crate, with seeing the force projection of Luke Skywalker, and when he ordered for all the guys to shoot, aim every gun we have at that man, and everything else. I think we're going to see in Episode 9 that Kylo surpasses Vader. But the one thing I do want to state, since we are on Vader, at least with Episode 7 and 8, the one thing that's taken away from the whole entire saga films and thus far the spin-offs, Vader's still the boogeyman. His shadow still looms that strongly 30 years later after his death.
Yeah.
He looms over everybody wanting to either fear that another Vader will rise or become the next Darth Vader. He is still the figurehead of everything going on in the galaxy.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1 second. Hold on a second.
Like
you keep talking.
Something.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I couldn't hear you over. Keep talking. What was that, Iris? I couldn't hear you over him saying, keep talking.
Yeah, said he really does personify the dark side, and no matter about the sequel trilogy, it really does. There is not going to be another Darth Vader. Kylo Ren can become more powerful, but he's still not going to become Darth Vader.
True, but I think in Episode 9 is where Kylo will. He won't become the next Darth Vader, but I think he'll step out of the shadows of his grandfather. I think really the one thing I've enjoyed, even from Last Jedi, I know there's a lot of people that didn't care for it. I'm not one of them. I actually liked it. But the one thing I really enjoyed was watching the progression of Kylo. And what I'm enjoying about that progression is it's the opposite of what we normally get. Like what we get with Rey, what we had with Luke, what we had with Anakin. We always watch their progressions of getting better and getting stronger and becoming more good until Anakin's fall, or until, Luke decides to go on a vacation on an island in Ireland for a while, or, whatever the case may be. Kylo, on the other hand, we went from a whiny wannabe kid to a very strong dark side user to what is he going to be in Episode 9? You know what I mean? And to me, that's a really, really fascinating story arc for me.
Yeah.
I'm actually more fascinated by Kylo Ren than I am by Rey in the new saga.
That's going to be very interesting. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And Rey's our protagonist. She's the one we're supposed to care about, but I think they're doing Kylo's story arc really well. And that's a credit to Adam Driver, too.
Yeah. There's been a lot of discourse about how everyone was kind of sidelined in order for Kylo to develop and for him to get that storyline. It's always been about the Skywalkers. Kylo's the Skywalker. It kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think if there was any character I do have a major complaint about, like getting kind of sidelined, though, is General Hux. Because I always, when Episode 7 came out, I looked at Hux as Kylo's Tarkin.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then I saw Bill Weasley in Episode 8.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't see a strong leader of the First Order. I saw a goofball. And comedy. I saw Jar Jar Binks in a uniform. You know, and
well, like you see that scene in Episode 7 where he's giving that speech on Starkiller Base, and you're just like it's like space Hitler up there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like kind of like this whole thing. You're just like, oh. I mean, it's scary, it's creepy, but at the same time, you're like, you don't know if you want to go, yeah, no, wait, he's the bad, yeah, no, he's the bad guy, no.
Like
The novel does go some way to explaining it in the sense that Hux is characterized as someone who would rather, make a show of blowing things up than actually doing something efficient. And they also do elaborate on the fact that, like, the older officers who are, lower in rank than him, they don't trust him. They think he's too young to be leading this sort of thing. Like, they're like old Imperials, and they don't think he's going to last very long. And so, in the film, it does kind of come across as like he's pretty much useless. But I don't know. I appreciate that the book added that kind of nuance to him.
Yeah.
And honestly, and that last shot of him in The Last Jedi, like, he's plotting something. He's been thrown around quite a bit. Like, he's not going to stand for it much longer. Like, I want to see him and Kylo, like, just kill each other. Like. Well,
here's a question. Episode 9, obviously, Kylo Ren needs to die. Whether he's redeemed or not, he's got to die.
I don't know.
Would you see? The question I would ask is, which of the three ways that I'll present do you think is more likely for Kylo's death? Do you think it's his redemption and he saves Rey? Do you think it's Rey striking him down? Or do you think it's Hux from behind?
All three at once? I'd be down with that.
What?
Rey would be like the most unlikely allyship. Like, Rey stabs him in the front, Hux stabs him in the back. Good. Done.
Yeah. I don't know, because I think the redemption thing would almost make it would almost be too easy of an out. I mean, but at the same time, that's kind of the story of Star Wars, is this fall redemption, fall redemption, fall redemption. I could see something more along the lines of what happens in the novelization of where, and I can't think of the name of the book. It's an old legend story where Cadus dies at the hands of Jaina, and it's not until he's actually dying that he kind of comes back to the light side. Mm-hmm. I could see something more like that, where it's not that he makes, Kylo makes this grand gesture like Vader did of doing something like that. It's he's dying, he realizes, oh, wait, no, this is not right. I'm sorry. Kind of a redemption type of a thing. I could see something more like that, but I think they've done, and maybe they've done this on purpose to kind of throw us off of painting Kylo in this irredeemable light. They've really gone out of their way to show Kylo cannot be redeemed. Kylo cannot be redeemed.
But yet they also left the window open for him, because as much as he had daddy issues, and I know all the fanboys are pissed that he killed Han Solo, but he's a mama's boy. It was shown in Episode 8. He couldn't fire and kill on his own mother. Yeah. That could be the catalyst of his turn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's difficult for me to envisage a kind of Vader-style redemption, because Kylo has been given so many chances at redemption, far more than Vader ever had. Like, Rey is constantly saying, you can turn. Like, he had so many chances, and he's deliberately said, no, I want to stay dark. I want to actually strengthen my ties to the dark side. It's not like he doesn't want to be conflicted. So even if he were redeemed, I don't know what that redemption would look like. Okay, well, let me throw a scenario out there then, and see how you guys would feel about it. Say Kylo, Hux, and all them are on board a Juggernaut. I dread to say Death Star 4.0, but a Dreadnought, a Juggernaut Star Destroyer, and they've got Leia's ship in sight.
and they're waiting for now Supreme Leader Kylo Ren to give the order to destroy the ship, and he knows his mother's on there, and he can't give it. He hasn't necessarily turned, but he just cannot kill his own mother. At that point, distracted, turmoil with his feelings towards his mother, that's when Hux strikes him down, and gives the order to fire.
Yeah, I would love to. Honestly, I'd love to see that. Like, Hux keeps a dagger up his sleeve. I'm super down.
Yeah. One of my, and I know it gets the movie gets a lot of crap for its use of forced humor, but I love that scene when Kylo's down in the throne room and Hux walks in and picks up the gun and is aiming it towards him Kylo's like, "Oh, you're awake! Oh, great!"
Hi, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I did like that. Then that was Donald Gleason's idea to have him go for his blaster.
Nice.
So anyway, just kind of wrapping things up now. Final thought, kind of our final thoughts on Lord Vader. I think, is it safe to say that he's pretty much, if you were to give a ranking of favorite Star Wars characters, Vader's probably going to be in most Star Wars fans' top 3.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If I was to sum up Vader in one word, it would just be iconic. Like.
Oh yeah.
Like he is in many ways. Like honestly, he might even be the closest to like the face of the Star Wars franchise. Like.
Oh, he is. You ask anybody, I think he's one of the. And there's certain characters in other genres that are like this, that are like that character, that are like that. You ask, you don't have to be a Star Trek fan to know who Mr. Spock is.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in the world knows who Mr. Spock is. You don't have to know wrestling to know who Hulk Hogan is.
Actually, I don't know who that is.
Oh.
But yeah, no, I take your point.
Yeah, there are these iconic people, and it's the same. And Vader's the same way. You mentioned Star Wars, and the first thing is like, oh yeah, Vader, yeah. I am your father. Those are iconic, things like that. But
in American cinema, there are 2 iconic villains that are more beloved than most of anybody else in their franchises, and that's Freddy Krueger and Darth Vader. Darth Vader is my number 1 by all means. I own his freaking lightsaber on my wall, for God's sake. The character has always been a fascination, a fear, and just beloved throughout it. I don't think Star Wars is done with him, and I don't think the fan base is done with hearing stories about him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, then we are going to, with that being said, we're going to wrap things up here. Iris, why don't you tell the listeners where they can find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at iris_Robin, and you can also find me on my website, which is irisrobin.ca, because Canada.
Blame Canada. Sorry.
Yep. Oh, yeah, well, that song from South Park, I know that.
Chris, what about you? Where can they find you at?
Well, most recently, you can find me next week right here on War of the Stars as we give our 1-year anniversary, which was supposed to be happening tonight, but due to technical difficulties, weather, and other issues, unfortunately, it had to get postponed. That's my fault, guys. It's one of the reasons why you're getting an audio-only podcast. One of the reasons why you're only getting an audio-only podcast this week. We had some technical issues. But we will have, hopefully, our full panel that we're supposed to have and celebrate Mark's 1 year with the War of the Stars. Beyond that, you can find me pretty much on anything with Realm of the Mist on it. And, of course, on RadioCast FM every Monday as I'm raising the underground, playing all your favorite rock and metal hits. That's right, I take heavy metal and jam it straight up your no-no holes.
As for me, actually that will be in 2 weeks will be the 1-year anniversary.
Oh, 2 weeks, excuse me.
2 weeks, so it's okay. You can find me on Twitter at John Mark Tolley 1, because I am the #1 John Mark Tolley on Twitter. Also on Facebook at John Mark Tolley and at Mark Tolley, and on Instagram at Mark Tolley also. Sorry, I had to see what my Instagram name was actually. Sorry.
Oh, guys, on YouTube, make sure you're hitting that subscribe and bell button so you know all the great shows that are coming up besides this one. All the other great War of the Stars shows, Journal of the Jedi, Star Wars Canon Library, That Trans Geek Girl, all the great shows. And, of course, we have a Patreon page, guys.
Yes.
Please, I'll post it up here on the video. Make sure you guys go visit that. Give us a follow. Give us a like. Give us some money. We need it.
Yes. Here, a little thing since we're talking about that. Just a little challenge for all the, especially the followers on not Facebook, Facebook too, and on our YouTube page. Right now, I think we have 43 followers. I have a challenge for all of you 43 followers out there. Get at least one more person to subscribe and to follow. Let's try, within 1 month, let's try and double our subscription rate. And then 1 month later, we'll take that 80-some people and we'll try to double that. Within a year, we'll have over 500,000 subscribers. If we can double our subscription rate every month, within 12 months, we'd have over 500,000 subscribers.
Oh, lit.
Let's see if we can do that. Let's make that a goal to each month double our subscribers. So all you guys that are out there as subscribers, go out there and make friends and tell people about War of the Stars, tell people about Realm of the Mist.
Well, you know what? I will add to that to give time for this build up. Obviously, it's March right now. Pretty soon we will hit Christmas again before we know it. So I will put it this much: if we reach 1,000 subscribers by December, Realm of the Mist Entertainment will have some form of present for each and every one of you guys. I don't know what yet. We'll discuss that as the time comes. But we reach 1,000 by December, and we will do something special for each and every one of you. So put the word out there.
All right. Well, with that being said, on behalf of everyone here at War of the Stars and at Realm of the Mist, have a good day, and may the Force be with you.
Always.